joining us, Dudley Cocke from Roadside Theater and Rosalba Rolón from Pregones Theater. We have an hour to dig into the themes of Betsy, the principles of doing this work. And so we thought that first we would hear from you and get 3-5 questions that you want to ask of these two theater companies.
The second half was so deep. The second half began so deep, and it kind of left me with wanting more. And so where the intermission came, you know, that part of the story and the narrative just took us on a journey. And then after intermission, we were just kind of dropped with this bomb. And then it ended. So you can speak to that.
This thing has been, what, many years in the making, right? And many iterations of groups have worked on this. So I'm just kind of curious how you were able to do this as individual groups and then link it together.
For me, there seemed to be a Betsy missing somewhere along the lines, because I struggled with the modern day Betsy kind of connecting to her mom. It left me a little confused because she knew her mom. So there was a disconnect for me there.
This is like a crabby Marxist question, but
I like this.
Yeah, so it felt like what was missing for me was where, like, her story and her ancestral story kind of was robbed, and I didn't get a sense that, like, the dispossession of like certain groups of people in American history, that didn't feel portrayed. It felt like almost an accident that she didn't know. But I guess I'm wondering, like, what was the decision in like who was responsible for the loss of history and the loss of, like, an ancestral tie. And so I guess, yeah, what was your thoughts on that?
Who was responsible in the story?
Like,
or in
the decision, yeah, I guess in the story, it didn't feel portrayed to me that there was, like, a responsible party. It felt incidental that she had lost touch with her history, and there's a lot of, like, political camps that would say that is, like, a dangerous portrayal, because people would say that history's actually been robbed and it's a violent, and so that's, I guess I would like to speak on that.
One of the things I wondered about is, even though it was about these two women, and I can't decide if it was the nature of the performance, the lighting, I thought that the male was really the one that they were reacting off of. It was a story that was really, he was the central figure, the evolving male, and they were just kind of bouncing off of that. So I thought the gender was interesting.
So we'll take the easy one first, which is Eric's question about how the play developed. So it began with one of the longtime Roadside ensemble members, Ron Short, not being able to find his great-great-great-grandmother's gravestone. And he really looked hard. He spent about months, a year, trying to find where that grave marker was. And he never could find it. So he decided, if you read the blog series, he talks about this in the blog series, which is referenced in the program, how you can read that. He talks about how he decided to make this performance, which was going to be his great-great-great-grandmother's marker. So he made this one-person roadside performance with music and story as he began to piece together Elizabeth, the Irish immigrant, the milking maid, and how she came to start the Swindle family. So we took that show down to Nashville, Tennessee, to the Nashville Jazz Workshop, where we had friends and great musicians down there. And So we were going to flesh out the music because we'd worked with some of those musicians before. And we began building the music around his one-person show. And then B.G. Adair, who's a well-known pianist, jazz pianist, who, for those of you in New York, she'll be at Birdland on the 21st and 22nd here in New York playing with her trio. She said, as she began hearing the story, I want to get my story in. So we said, sure. And so that whole story about the gas station, she grew up in Horse Cave, Kentucky, and her dad, so that was her story, Granny Sally. So we built that into the play, and then we did a production in Nashville. Band of 5, cast of 3, just pretty much like you saw last night in terms of numbers. So then we brought that up to Pregones, where we've been visiting back and forth forever and making plays. And Pregones said, well, we're interested in this story. We've got music. And so then we began building another show off the Nashville show with Pregones, and we experimented with that in 2006, then again in 2008, and now we are here with it this month.
I mean, it's yeah, and essentially at that point, when we began to talk about it, was how can we, you know, Betsy, this modern Betsy, gave us the opportunity to do something, to take her to represent in a way our relationship, the relationship between the two companies and the relationship between the two cultures. And so it was like having a baby, right, that represented both. And of course, once you begin to work with history and facts, it can become a very dangerous territory. We have done quite a few historical plays, and of course, at the end of the day, it is not a history lesson, it is a play. And you have to make choices that make sense for the story. So it is very interesting when we began to, actually, I think we killed a few characters along the way because so we have to kill this one, we have to kill that one. Yeah, so there will be, because if not, you sit there to get a history lesson, that's not what you pay for at the end of the day. I'm talking now as an audience, right? You come in to see this show and you want to get a sense of that history, but it is hard. You're always going to miss a few pieces, and we, you know, just like we always say, we cannot romanticize collaborations, and at times we, myself included, tend to romanticize historical plays. So we never approached it as a historical play, but you know, as a story of these families coming from different points of view, and we've talked a lot about what responsibility do we assume for some of the things we're saying, right? What are the things that we assume? There was a point where I'm thinking, I don't want to portray all these Appalachian men like all these monsters, you know. I was the one trying to redeem these Appalachian men, and so we work with the stories that we have in front of us, and we mold them and we shape them. There is the history that we tell in the play is perhaps even much less violent than the documentation that we have of what happened. By actually, yes, these women's lives revolving around the decisions of these men, century after century, and trying to survive, you know, and essentially the role of unintended prostitution just to survive. I mean, it's a whole culture created for women around, that revolved around the decisions that these men made for them. So that is what we were facing. Now, Pregones came to the story at the end. I mean, this whole story was built. And so we on our end have had to work with our audiences, try to understand that we still, on our end, we want to tell that story. Because some people have asked, but we don't have enough of the Puerto Rican story. I said, imagine, that would be a 3-hour. If we start with Christopher Columbus arriving in 1892, and we're going to be for 3 centuries, and then at the end of the day are very similar stories. Very similar stories. And so we said, we had to put that to rest, that anxiety of not having enough, because we believe that, especially by having someone like Caridad playing Betsy, in her body, she's this strong New Yorker woman, and her body tells you, we hope, that reaction. I don't know if it's clear, her mother has died when she's 10 years old, and her mother worked so hard to be a Puerto Rican woman, to be able to not only to be at peace at home, but to survive in a very strong musical Bronx culture that didn't leave much space for her as a swindle. And her mother morphed emotionally to be able to be that. So Betsy does not really remember a lot of the Irishness of her mother. So this is, but thank you for pointing that out, because maybe there are ways in which we can even be clearer. We're still working. Every day we come in with, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. It is a short second act, I know, but it is dense, and we thought maybe this is where we need to stop. But it would be good to hear about all the things that you need, if you feel that you want to share that you need, and we're all ears. And thank you. There are other questions about...
Yeah, the question of historical responsibility is one that, of course, comes up in the play. Betsy says there, towards the end, she's interrogating that the whole way through. Who's responsible? Who's responsible? She says towards the end, they're all accomplices. Earlier than that, she makes this connection between indentured servitude and the slaves coming to Puerto Rico. So this mountain to mountain. So she said, she says they're all slaves. It's all about slavery. That's what the analysis is. It's all about slavery. And then she gets personal at the end and says, forget it. Somebody has got to be responsible. They are all accomplices. At which point the spirit steps back and says, in essence, that may be so, but they're all here now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you can finger point, but just know that they're all here in the room, and you can pick where you want to pick as your mind takes you. Yeah. So that's where we tried to let it rest, unresolved, but with a kind of tension.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the other questions. But please tell us if we're on if you want anything. Talked about, well, I was going to say the guilty party that yes, it is of course easier in a different kind of play. It would probably be easier to politicize, which I think the play is very political, but to politicize very more, upfront, and say, these two countries made this happen, and we're hoping that by understanding what the journey was, we can imagine these systems in these countries creating such circumstances to enslave their own people and to go to another place and to America, specifically to North America. And for us, we even discuss other things, with the conversation today about frontiers and about borders. I think that the analogy and the metaphor, we hope, will land. And it has. You don't have no idea how, since we opened Saturday afternoon, how many audience members from South America that have come to see the play say, this is my story, this is the story of migration today. I mean, so we've got interesting feedback, but to me the most interesting is how many people are coming to us to tell us the entire ancestry.com and their family. And it is fun to hear that they are thinking about it, you know, that we're all thinking, we've all been thinking about it, and looking at being proud of it rather than, oh, what a mess, you know. In our case, as we know, we're Puerto Rican Latinos, we know we're mixed, we know, and we have been at the center of our Spanish or European African blood as such internal peace, and to know that there's more. It's like, oh, just when I thought I had it right, there's more. There's more, and it expands from there. But please, if we're not answering your questions, feel free to challenge us. We're good. And as we say, we're still, it's taken 10 years. We can take another 3 weeks to continue to tweak, believe me.
Just a comment, and that is the ending song, or the hook from the poem, Y tu abuela donde está, for me was very powerful. And there was a place where it seemed like the translation wasn't there immediately. So I was wondering if that was just a technical glitch, or if that was...
I'll check on that.
Yeah, because I think that was really powerful.
It should be.
It was just a powerful way to end with this idea of, you know, your history, you know, and this desire that oftentimes we have to hide it when it's right in front of us.
Maybe we can contextualize the poem a bit so that we Arnaldo, you have...
I just want to point out in reference to translation, there's both a practical side of not translating everything, and there's a strategy behind not translating everything. And I mentioned this in our prior conversations with a couple of people, but Rosalba, I'm thinking of Translated Woman, which is a prior project, and I wonder if you can say a couple of words about that, because it's a little bit, you know, a little bit of a challenge to the audience when you want to communicate something that is anchored in culture, anchored in language, and you want to share it, but you also want to keep something. Is that, do you want to?
Sure, and I want to say though that the translation of the last song is done, so I'll check on that. I mean that it must have been a glitch. But yes, thank you. And then I'll put the Y tu abuela donde está poem in context, because I think that's important. So I don't know if you know Ruth Behar. She is an amazing anthropologist and scholar in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a good friend. And she wrote this book, Translated Woman, many years ago. And Ruth had gone to San Luis de Potosí in Mexico and had written the story of this woman there. And then when she was about to leave, this woman said to Ruth, she said, my job is done here. And she was beginning to feel very guilty about being there on what Magdalena Gomez calls a cultural safari that so many of us are guilty of, probably in this room, all of us together. You know, you go, you observe, you write. And so she was feeling pretty strong about that. She wasn't sure that that's what she wanted to be at, and she was gonna, and this woman's reaction immediately was, leave on Friday, not really fully understanding, leave on Friday afternoon, there aren't too many guards around. Because in her mind, Ruth probably would have trouble traveling, but she didn't. But she was, when it was mirroring her own situation, when Ruth published the beautiful book, brought her back the book. See, this is the book about your life. And she said, I'll bring it to the priest because I don't know how to read. And so the priest will read it to me. Now, how do you, you know, when we actually did the project and we began to do these translations, that emotional translation just could not come through in the same way. That's when we began. Arnaldo has been helping us to really not to feel too guilty about not translating everything, but to actually condense a thought, because there's some nuances of the culture and the emotional tone of the piece that cannot be translated. Although this one was, so I apologize for that. The poem, if I'm missing something, let me know, but that's basically the reason for it. Y tu abuela donde está is a line of a very, very important poem by a Puerto Rican poet, Luis Pales Matos. He wrote these, Fortunato Vizcarrondo. I say that everything was written by Luis Pales Matos because I adore him. Fortunato Vizcarrondo, and it is about this family whose grandmother is a black Puerto Rican woman, and every time someone comes to visit, they give her something to do to be in the bedroom, hidden, right? Sort of like, and they walk around with their, very, very straight hair, and at the end of each line is what we call the PA, or the kick, saying, and your grandmother, where is she? And she walks around and she paces with her, straight hair and this and that. And your grandmother, where is she? And they come to visit and this and that and the other. And your grandmother, where is she? And so what happened is that went deep into our culture, all of the Caribbean and South America, the very famous line from that poem. So whenever we see people that are like tentative about who they are, we're like thinking, "Y tu abuela dónde está?" Who are you trying to hide? Who are you trying to hide? We have so anyway. That was the reason, because Betsy at that point is doing her thing and challenging her audience, her friends, and everyone. I received a very interesting private, I won't say, of course, it's a private email recently about this young Puerto Rican woman who is half Irish. And she's, we're so comfortable in being who we've been for 300 years and she says, I can finally say I'm also proud of being Irish. Because my own race, my own people, my own friends, every time I would say something, they would be like I was trying to brag. I was trying to sound white. I was trying to sound, and she's been punished for it. And so we hope that part of it is that will give us the freedom to not have to be so judgmental about each other, because at the end of the day, we have to live with ourselves, no? But, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I just had a question. There was a part of the play that was really jarring. When the male character he used the N-word, and in our circle we talked about it as oppressive language about the life that this child was going to have. And it seemed like a real turning point in the play, and it also, I felt, really was in your face about some of the, I guess, more political and social issues that were behind a lot of the statements. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because it was a very different kind of scene and language and approach than a lot of else in the play, talking about indentured servitude and being a barmaid, what did that really mean? That was talked about in a more playful way versus this was a very different type of language. So I was interested in hearing you talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the thing is that how history can soften, time softens. And so as we were moving more into the present, it got harder and had a harder edge to it. I mean, time just seems to rationalize and soften, though we were trying to give some sense of the violence of what the tavern trade was. I mean, when, we even use effects where that drum hits and Elizabeth jerks here and there. Just the sort
without it being so literal. I mean, originally we did, but then.
Yeah. So there's if Roadside's right in the central Appalachian coalfields, which is it's not the same as other parts of the South or even Tennessee. It's all the Cumberland Plateau, but when you know, a lot of the Klan came out, the Klan actually started in Tennessee, not all that far from the mountains. So there's this whole question in Roadside's work from the beginning of the Klan, of racism, and what that meant, and how that has played, how that has existed in our own community, a coal mining community. So it's not been the same in a coal mining community as it's been outside of the mountain community, but nevertheless, there is that absolute racism of the area that led to the Klan and to the lynchings. Now, there weren't lynchings per se where we are in the coal fields, but again, you get out of the coal fields and it's right there. So we wanted to deal with that in some way, because it would seem to be the reality of that evolution of the family, or that development of the family. And so that's how it entered in. And there's a very good oral history that you can find online. Studs Terkel took the history, and it's called Why I Joined the Klan. And it's this oral history of a guy talking about how, you know, why he joined the Klan, and then how he came to understand that the Klan was just being played itself by other forces and politicians for their own purposes. So we couldn't go but so far into that, but as background, we're very conscious of it.
The other thing is that, and then the when you're crafting a character, it would be an easy way out to make this character such a bad person, because it feels like that. And so this is why we think it's we're human, and we can be many things. He loved his little girl, he played the piano, and he was sad, and she didn't need him anymore. And then he goes on and says something like that. So as characters go, we needed to just go to the humanity of the character. You can be a really nice person and be a really racist, and be a great father, So it's all of that complexity that we deal with when when you have so many characters that you need to craft. And of course, even rehearsing it and saying the word and directing it is not fun. It's not fun, but it has to get done.
Yeah, music is one of the most prominent characters in the show. And so not just in terms of the songs and the words, but, I'm always intrigued by music that is not just about punctuation, but it does its own interpretive work. And so clearly was a lot that went into the process of collaboration around, making sure those flavors were represented, and that kind of gets me excited. I'd love to hear anything you would want to share about that process, and, what it took to deliver that, which was very, very compelling.
Both Pregones and theaters have had a long history of using and rooting a lot of our narrative in story, because in music, because in both regions the music is such an important feature, cultural anchor in many ways. With Pregones, we began as using in the 70s, which in the Teatro Popular culture of the times and political theater, there was always that guitar player on the stage, we said, yeah, that's us. And so we began to use music first as accompaniment, and then it began to grow to the point where our ensemble is equal parts actors and musicians. We rehearse together on stage, we create together. Sometimes we yield the story to the music, and sometimes the music, you know, and at this point, because we have a musical director who's been with us, he came in very young, he was 21, 22. He's been with us for 20 plus years. And also training musicians for theater, because it's not just a music gig. You have to really understand it. So compositionally, it's very interesting. Something interesting that happened in the mountains, we went to Norton to do some of the process like in February, is that Dudley and I went off on our minds like, well, this is an illusion. This, I was telling this to Jarani before, and Ron kept saying, well, this is an illusion. And Desmar said, excuse me? I need to compose an illusion, so talk to me some more. So, how does an illusion sound like? So it is about, that is a contribution. That is the contribution of having the musician, the composers, Ron and in this case Ron and Desmar, be in the room of the discussion. They're not jukebox. They're not brought in after everything is done. Or you couldn't work. I don't know how. We don't know how else to do it, but we find that it is very valuable that each member standing on that stage is invested in the story as much as the actors are.
Yeah, one thing. I don't know how much you know about the Central Appalachian coal fields, but big money came late. It was one of the last pockets of the U.S. frontier. Money and capitalism didn't come in until the late 1880s. So, you know, put that in historical. Leslie County didn't get a railroad until 1910. So, you know, so this is one of the last pockets of the U.S. frontier, and it's in the east. And when money and capital came in, it came in a huge force. And it completely took over, coal and timber, completely took over the region. So you've maybe heard the expression, rich land, poor people. Where Appalshop Roadside is located is the poorest congressional district right now in the U.S. and also the sickest. And they say it's 98% white, but it's much more complicated than that, because it's Scots-Irish and Native American were both hiding out there for various reasons. And so that began crossing immediately. So you've got this 125-year history in the coal fields of being a mineral colony. So I once tried to get a little money for our theater company when we were getting started. And so I thought Bethlehem Coal, which is now defunct, incidentally, I thought they might give a little money, since they had made billions of dollars in the region, to
5,000 or so.
Yeah, to our theater company. So I sent a request in, and I knew somebody in the company here in the New York headquarters. I said, just follow and see where we get rejected if we do. I knew we would. And, you know, by the time it got past the local office, they just said, well, they're anti-coal, they're not our people, it's not in our interest. So we got no money. So you've got this 125-year history as a mineral colony, and that really is what has connected us to communities around the world that we have connected to. So like Nigeria's River State, Shell Oil, Royal Dutch Floor. I mean, we just connect like that immediately. And where they see the connection is in the resistance that comes up in the music. So, you know, Which Side Are You On? Came Florence Reese, right out of the coal fields. So you have this strong, strong musical resistance coming from these cultures. And so that's this strength we make. And our image has always been in this case, the sort of two roots. I mean, we want people who come see the play to feel the Appalachian musical root coming up, the Puerto Rican, Caribbean, African root coming up, that they haven't been just homogenized, that you can feel the strength of those roots as something else is being made.
And also, You know, Desmar, our musical director, would be the first to tell you, and he shared that in our Let's Talk evening when we began 21 years ago. Just like we like to say, music is a universal language. We found that it is not. That those musicians were in one room together and they began to understand and be able to play together after they began to tell each other stories about the music. It was not until that conversation happened, because it just wouldn't happen. And they were struggling and thinking, why is it so difficult? You play the instrument. No, it's not that simple. You come, it's in your body, it's in your soul, you push it, and you want to, you know, you stand your ground, and this person stands their ground, and how do we negotiate this? And so now it's so fluid that we forget how hard it was in the beginning 20 years ago. But also that the different aesthetics that each company brings. In our case, we use a lot of, those of you who have been working today with Jeremy and Jorge, a lot with the body and what the body tells you, you know. The fact that we move different, Caridad moved different than Patrick on stage, you know, and that's important. You know, the two actors come from two different cultures, and how their body reflect that on stage is important. And so we go there, you know. So anyway, those are the various components of negotiating the collaboration. But it is the reason we continue to do it is because it has worked. We have made it work.
Yeah, I want to really comment because I think it's very difficult stylistically and music-wise to get like that distinctiveness, but that blending without it turning it into a bland, amorphous kind of mixture that doesn't portray the rooted and the defiant element of each musical tradition. And I have a comment about music and also a question about the plot line. First of all, I love what you did with the final piece of the Silvia Rexach song, Olas y Arenas. Many people don't know, but Silvia Rexach, and I found it curious, and maybe it's not obvious, but Silvia Rexach, which is a great Puerto Rican composer, she actually married an Irishman.
An Irishman, yeah.
His name was Riley, and he happens to be because her daughter is my stepmother. So,
I want to talk to you after this is over, by the way.
Oh, you need the rights to this?
No. We have. No, but I would love for Sharon to see. I don't know how we can bring her over.
But it was great because the song is about what you have, what you think you have, but it's always going, but you don't have it until it's gone, you know, with the metaphor of the wave. And the translation was pretty good. It wasn't a cliché translation, the one to English, so I was relieved to do it. And the jazzy aspect of it, I've never seen that, so it's really great. I'm hoping to talk to her daughter to tell her that this is going on, and it's really great. My question was about that symmetry in the storyline with the I think you also did a great job in portraying that, like, that multifaceted aspect of ideologies. I'm not making a cliché out of it, like you're not totally bad, whatever. I think it would, even, you know, without going into the too Baroque element, I think the character of her father, the Puerto Rican father, it's worth not going into a too Baroque thing and keeping a short second act still, but maybe drawing a little bit more of the parallelisms with him, because you feel like the characters are also rich in the other side, that you're left expect, even though at the
more development for the father.
Of that figure of his father, of her father, I mean, because it's a good opportunity to also draw on the parallelisms of these male figures and see the symbiotic element, that she doesn't have to see this or that. They're actually maybe the same personality, you know, in terms of the histories, not only the histories, but in terms of the rough decisions that they had to make, in terms of the tough, you know, things, because her father also, which is the one that she adores, also cut off a lot of her past. So he's also to blame in a way. So, you know, I think it would be for her a good character development, and also to balance the story, provide a little bit more symmetry into the other tradition, because many people, audience members, especially if you want to be, you know, outside the Latino community, they don't know necessarily the history of Puerto Rico and of Utuados and the mountains. So it'd be good, it'd be a little bit more generous to give them a little hint in terms of that side and draw that symmetry.
Thank you.
Yeah, you just put your point on a central question
Yeah.
that we have been, so,
Yeah.
good dramaturgy.
Oh, no, I was just going to comment on the movement. I also thought that was very, the choreography and kind of keeping the distinct movement styles of each and also kind of dancing together. So I thought that was, I liked that a lot.
Thank you.
So I've been thinking, listening to you about imagining how you founded these companies in the 70s and the body of knowledge that you built for decades, and I think I would love to hear your pep talk to those of us who are trying to figure out how to do this work, to create more space for this kind of theater. You know, when I walked around PRTT in Manhattan, this kind of theater is certainly not the mainstream of American theater, and part of what we're trying to do is create more space in our colleges, which are really informing a generation of artists, and in our communities that represent so many rich artists. And so what's your advice for us who want to take it back home? And if you could speak to some of the principles that you've developed.
Well, I have to say, and maybe we even talked about it also. We began in 1979, you know, as an ensemble, and continue to be an ensemble, where he's associate artistic director now for more than 27, 28, 29 years, I don't know, a lot of years. Going on 30 years, and Yaran is an ensemble member as well. And it was driven by an intense desire to do, myself and two other colleagues. I did not do it alone. No one can do this alone. That's the number one. That's the number one advice. Don't try to do it alone. That's just, you know, it was again the culture of colectivos, of popular theater, of things that you need to do in community, and we needed to do it together. So a group of us got together to begin to establish our own rules. In a way, every time I hear, you know, well, this is how the industry works. Well, you know, we are the industry. We're our own industry, and when we create these rules, it's good to know what's going on out there, but it's important that we create different atmosphere for our artists and for our relationships, you know, something that is healthier than what the industry has to offer in so many ways. So we wanted that. Myself being tired of auditioning for so many hookers that I didn't know it was a hooker or an actress. They're like, you know what, I think I'll settle for being an actress. and I had this conversation with Kim from Roadside years ago. She said, well, forget it. I auditioned for so many barmaids that I had to say enough, you know. So those are one of the things that push you to the edge. And what I tell the students everywhere is, you know, if you have something to say, and at least two people to listen to you, to hear what you have to say, you stand under a tree, and that's your set, and the sun is your lighting designer, and you tell your story, and you're on your way. It's about making sure that you control your mechanism for producing your own work, which is always hard. But you know, we started very modestly, but I have to say, and thank you, universities were the first ones who opened the door for us. Not theater departments. Oh, we would never before, you know, until we became very famous. We became very famous, and then the theater departments. But it was always the student associations, the ones who made it happen for us. The student associations in universities for years were the ones who invited us to go to the auditorium or to the smallest theater the university could possibly give up for us. And so, and of course we have to contend with a lot of things that happen in the process. And then, you know, we began to move up in the ladder, and then we were invited by this department or that, usually the Spanish department or the humanities. The theater department was the last one to get in line to get us into the main theater. And then we began to perform, especially when we traveled together with Roadside and Junebug. perform in some wonderful universities, but certainly universities have been generous. So I say, you know, in any way you can support your student associations to make things happen, especially for artists who are starting their companies, because I think that is a natural connection to some of the work that, but that doesn't imply that we want to kill. I was invited to Yale recently, and you know, it's not about killing people's dreams. Your dreams go to Broadway. Why not? You can dream of that. There's no contradiction. There's no contradiction. It's just that there's so many other things that you can do in addition to that, or while you're building that career. There's no sense in stopping to wait to be discovered while you're having a drink in a bar, right? Not that anyone is waiting. But it is all about creating the mechanisms, and the universities have been very, very a great resource for all of us throughout the years, which is why, you know, some time ago, I think our first conversation was in the late 90s, why don't we begin around Pregones to build this group of scholars that have been so generous, but I think that we've been divided. There is sort of a love-hate relationship between artists and scholars. How can we cross the line? How can we open the door and the flow so that instead of being observing each other or like, you know, it's about really working. It's been great to have Jamie in the rehearsals. She can tell you how this happened as well as we can, because she saw it happen. She saw it developed. And so those are the conventions we need to get rid of, that we're in these two different worlds. Because in reality, it's an artificial convention or artificial border that we created. But my advice, if you have these dreams to do your own work, is just, you know, you just have to start doing it. Look for people like Rosa and Pregones and many others who are willing and able. You know, in our case at Pregones, we have, because we have two spaces, we have a project that Jorge and Alban are the directors of, which is the artist space at Pregones. We say we have these homes. You know, let's let artists in addition to ourselves. So we have a space grants program, so artists can apply for a certain amount of free hours of use of a good stage and a good professional setting with additional advice, technical advice. You know, they can bring their piece all the way up to workshop production. So, you know, there are ways in which we can continue to build a strong relationship and alliances between universities and our organizations.
So from Roadside, you can go to roadside.org, and we're in the process for the last couple of years, and it will continue for a few more years, of really putting all of our methodology and really we're hoping for fairly deep context that is available to anyone. I mean, we're putting the plays up. The plays can be taken, reimagined. I mean, it's all in Creative Commons. So it's a matter of really, in that case, finding the time and space for you to go down into it and see what you can use. The idea is we're trying to leave footprints of where we've walked through these 40 years of making plays, so that you can do the same. We had the advantage, the three core company members of Roadside all came out of political activism in the 60s and got into making theater after, you know, around 29 or 30, when they saw the power of art and culture. But came out of 60s civil rights, anti-Vietnam, came out of political activism. And the whole Appalshop, which is the framework, the larger organization that Roadside's one wing of, we make a lot of films. We really basically took control of all means of production. We make films, we got a record company, we got a radio station, we publish, etc. And the idea really came to us from the Southern Freedom Movement of the 60s through Highlander Center, which was we are somebody. Nobody had ever thought that there in this large public way and proclaimed it, because it had been, and we had proclaimed it and kept it in resistance through our music, through our stories, our oral history, but we'd never pushed it out to say, no, this is the story. We'd been in this battle, and then we took it and pushed it out with a large number of films, records, so forth, and so on. So we had this wind of the civil rights movement behind us. So I would say one thing to do is to see where you can get a wind pushing behind you.
Yeah, and if I could, and thank you for that, Oli, because it makes me think something that will be probably for the next Imagine American conversation, not because but it's a big one, which is what is the goal here? You know, what is the goal of the artist? We have our space, for example, and all of you are invited to come to our Bronx Theater. Such a beautiful, beautiful facility. It is where we live, really. Our offices and everything are there. A beautiful facility, but because a lot of the work around community engagement has been commodified, we are very adamant about being at peace with the fact that we exist to make art. We don't exist to do something else. That's the sacred goal, is to make art. Some people will use it as a tool for something, or whatever. I think the way we create it was a great resource for a lot of you in this room. But our goal is to make good art, and that can be transformative, hopefully. So the burden that is put on artists to do everything and be everything for everybody is something that we all need to think about very seriously, because we, the artists, need to free ourselves from those obligations if we're serious about the work that we do. Because we can always create something wonderful and transformative in our community if we don't have an index of expectations. And as an example, we went to this community once, and when the mayor said to us, "I'm so glad you're here because we have this problem," and he listed 15 social ills of that community, and we said, "We're here to do a play." But interestingly, that was our big contribution to that list. Right. It is the type of play we did, how we did it, how people got involved, that created the mechanism so they could have these other conversations. But the artists cannot do the whole thing. So this is why I think this is important. And I thank you for your candor. I think that we'll take that with us. It's awesome.
This is a question that's going to information as I listen to you, so if it's kind of a little bit blather, just take what you will of it. Tell me your name. Michael just looked back at me because he heard me do this audible sigh.
Oh no.
Saying all those things. No, in a good way, because I work, we're not former Ben, thank you for answering all those questions for the HowlRound blog. I work at an arts education nonprofit in a rural, pretty impoverished area that's looking to redefine itself after having a lot of funding issues, and where a lot of the money is exactly where you're talking about. Art is, true things about art, which is that it transforms people's lives and it, gives people, all sorts of different opportunities, but an unintended consequences, we end up running the risk of turning into a social service agency.
Totally.
And I was at a, my title is community engagement manager, which I gave myself, but I also
don't get me started. I tell you that's a whole.
And I imagine I would be on your side of a lot of it. I bring it up because I went to a forum in Philadelphia, pretty close, of various people in the arts involved in community engagement, and someone mentioned assessment. And there was another, much louder audible sigh in the room. Which is to say, on one hand, that what you're saying is absolutely true, and on the other hand, that I don't think I'm the only person, tasked with doing community engagement that doesn't necessarily want to be doing that. And so I guess my question, if I can put a point on all of it, is, I so admire the ways in which both companies have been able to do this work without kind of falling down that hole, and just thoughts you have about resources and, you know, ground to stand up, and, both in terms of, you know, not just funding, but also in terms of public representation that makes that make sense to the community around us that doesn't speak this language.
Yeah. I mean, we are the you know, oh God, we morph to get to that, you know, but we are finding that advocacy is playing a really big role in, you know, in any way that we can convey the information. The problem that is that a lot of the things that have been important to us and are important, again, have been commodified. Even the word community has been commodified. That's why we say Pregones is in a neighborhood. And I know that my neighbor are Sam and Mr. Robinson and Mr. Lou across the street, and I know exactly who is where, you know, and sunlight in the corner, and they, in the evening, like Vigia there said, get dressed to come to the theater. And so that we are in the neighborhood. We could talk about communities, but by now we have left-handed communities, you know, people with green hair communities. I mean, everything is a community. It's been commodified, and we lose the sense of the importance of what a community is, you know, and we are running the risk with the plight for social justice is borderline at this point beginning to look like that also. You know, that we've worked so hard to make it important, to make it central in our lives, and it's becoming a buzzword, and that worries me because we can see its impact and how we approach it. So you know, so yes, we do have to morph our language occasionally and often, or well, actually often, not occasionally, to be able to convey a message that should be very clear. The intrinsic value of the art, you know, and my message is, just like my community needs good teachers, good doctors, good lawyers, these good artists. You know, and I mean, we can say all we want, but we're not good. People notice if it's not good. So, you know, I don't know if I'm answering. I don't even think I have a great answer to your question. It's a very important question. I don't know, Arnaldo, if you wanna reflect on that a little bit. He's our great leader in our crafting language based on what's going on.
And I mean, coming from the development fundraising side, resource raising side, I think it's all about being very nimble. It's all about finding the right partners. I think certainly a network where infrastructures are big enough to guarantee some mobility, and I'm thinking of universities because most of them have endowments. You know, those kinds of partners are key for projects. The burden of growing an infrastructure and the sort of compulsory demand that nonprofits be small businesses and be responsible for social justice and social change is onerous. You know, it's as onerous as it sounds. But I think that staying nimble and one of the blog entries talked to us about abundance. You know, I earlier talked about the paradigm of generosity. We come from community-based work, right? We are networks of people who've been doing a lot with little for a long time. We don't glorify that. We want more resources, and we deserve them, and we continue to seek those out. So you shape the story to say, I'm not responding because of the call. I'm responding because of the fact of the work that I need to do. But then at the same time, that still means that we are inside an economy that sort of plays hide and seek with a lot of the work that we're trying to do. And that often means learning to, you know, be resourceful and work with what you have. And understanding that what we have is tremendous.
I would say it's a constant battle. And I remember years ago we were doing a big thing with Bruce Levitt up at Cornell. And big long, week-long festival, culmination of several years of work. And part of it, we had a humanities symposium, and Bernice Johnson Regan, Sweet Honey in the Rock, came at a SNCC. Civil rights movement was on the panel. And I was talking to her before we started this humanities panel. I said, well, Bernice, how do you go into this? And she said, I go into everything in a battle stance. I'm either going to gain territory or I'm going to lose territory. I mean, that's how she approached all of her work. Even if it was fairly benign humanities. You know, I'm either going to advance the idea or I'm going to lose. In other words, she was saying there's no neutral. And with the force of the direction and you're going against that, the minute you relax, you get swept down. So you just have to be in that mode. Now that mode does not mean you have to get completely worn out, and then in fact you can't get strong and find a kind of joy in that struggle. But you know, that's just part of the reality. And then the other thing about the mainstream in the industry, I learned very early on from someone who said the mainstream is any stream you can drown in. So
that's really good. Well, interestingly, if I don't know, we have time?
For one more comment.
No, I just wanted to say that in terms of the universities, and then if any of you are connected with large institutions, I think it's about shifting, and we talked about this earlier and I occasionally, about shifting the way we think. In a recent project, I lead a leadership institute at the Arts Presenters Conference, and there was this participant from Nigeria, and he comes from not a small village, you know, a township, and he has a one big institution and then smaller ones. But the big institution, it is what it is, a large institution in the town. And so, but what interestingly, what the conversation in the group that we were having is all of these representatives from very mainstream institutions and universities saying, struggling with how do we get out to the community, how do we talk to people, how do we get out and get people, you know, to know that what we're doing, obviously disconnected from their communities. And he said, you know, I hear about this desire to open your doors and go out, and in my case and in our town we're thinking, how can we get in? So it was the different question. It is a different question. It's just for us to be aware that people are trying to get into our places, into our universities, into our classrooms, into our, you know, how can people get in? You know what, sometimes we see the other as closing the door on us, but sometimes we're also guilty of closing some doors. So it's about how we keep that flexibility going. But anyway, I want to thank Imagining America for putting this together. It's an awesome day, and I'm so glad you all got to see Betsy.
Thank you.
One thing that occurs to me after listening to this wonderful conversation and having our story circle this morning, there are representatives maybe from many universities here, but we have Cornell University in New York, we have University of Wisconsin from Wisconsin, we have The Ohio State University, we have Oregon State University represented here. All of those institutions are land-grant institutions. I'm a historian, and one of the favorite things I've done in my work is to accidentally discover this rich root of art and theater from the teens, 20s, and 30s into the 40s that land-grant universities used to participate in and work in. And thanks to Jen Jensen's work and many other people's work, we're finding the leaders who are out there rebuilding this work, recreating it in a new time and a new way. And it strikes me that there's a very important argument or debate we need to figure out how to have in Imagining America with our colleges and university partners. Because the first question always is, what's the value of the arts and the humanities? I mean, we have big problems in the world, and this is nice, but, you know, so this is really important for us to be able to both learn and understand and know how to answer that question, respond to that question, and then how to live it out in the world. And for me, one of the things that's been arising lately is everybody is centered on problem solving. This is the language in our institutions, universities. We're doing problem solving, right? At Eduardo in New York City, we've got childhood obesity. We have all of these problems, and the tool for that work is science. This is how we solve these problems, with scientific interventions and
Evidence-based.
evidence-based, yes. And on the one hand, that conversation either marginalizes the arts and humanities right out of the picture, or it leads us to only look at an instrumental value. You know, what do you have to offer to help us reduce the childhood obesity rate? And I'm trying not to be cynical, too terribly cynical about this, because there's a value there. But Ruby Green Smith, who wrote the history of extension work at Cornell, has a phrase called that is the satisfactions of democratic living. And that's a whole different kind of thing. The value somehow in all of this is it is a way of pursuing and living out the satisfactions of democratic living. And what I think is really useful and important for us in the higher education world to do is to make friends with and humanize our scientist friends. Because in many ways, science is the same thing. Science is a way of people being able to experiment openly, publicly, to find out for themselves without having the king or the government tell them what the truth is. And it's a realm of creativity and the imagination. So bringing the arts and humanities and design together with the sciences, I think, could be really powerful. Yes. If we can, and it's already happening, and so part of what we want to do in Imagine America is find those leaders out there who are showing us how those things can be brought together, and how can we learn from them, how can we help support that work. We call it civic science. We got some money from NSF to actually do some work on this, and we're trying to grow something out of that. But I just felt that in this conversation.
We love scientists. We love to work, and this is very important, and thank you for mentioning that. In fact, we're developing a whole new piece at Pregones. You're all welcome to come see it about, it's called The Desire of the Astronaut, and hope to work with NASA scientists. And will anyone here is connected to space and the cosmos, please talk to us. And it would be great to get you aboard for that. Thank you for mentioning the sciences. It's very important to both of our companies, actually.